are you doing?
I'm establishing my brand.
No, no, no!
Good morning, writers, readers, and viewers. My name is Thomas A. Fowler, integrated producer in advertising by day, writer of commercial mainstream and science fiction by night. Always helping to guide you through all the marketing and writing advice that you need, and always aiming to instill hope. For level 1, we're going to work on your marketing and establishing your brand. A brand is an identifier and how people identify you, the author, and in terms of what you write, how you write it, and where you deliver it, and what they should be expecting from the experience. One great example is Carol Berg. She is so consistent in her brand identity. If she ever skewed away from her fantasy worlds, etc., her fan base would go livid, and it's a remarkable example. First thing we're going to do, we're going to answer 4 questions to identify your brand as a writer. This will help you actually create the foundation that you're going to be able to build your entire platform on and start writing really, really good material. First question, if your readers had to describe your writing in 1 sentence, what would they say? And this is really important because if you can't answer that question yet, your readers won't be able to answer that question. Agents and editors won't be able to answer that question. So if you can't answer that for them, then they won't know what to expect. They won't know what you write. They won't know what you're delivering to them day in and day out. Second question. When your reader finishes the last page of every one of your books, what emotion or catharsis will they feel? Now that doesn't mean that every emotion has to be the same at the end of every book, whether it's misery or happiness. Endings obviously are going to be different within each manuscript. However, it's the journey that they take with them. Obviously, when you're looking at George R.R. Martin and Game of Thrones, you're not exactly going in expecting sunshine and puppy dogs. You're expecting beheadings, lots of sex, and lots of mead and mulled wine. So it really just boils down to the experience. What is the experience you are going to deliver to your readers? That's the key in establishing your brand. And the answer to number 2. In my case, it's instilling hope. And within that, there's a wide variety of writing that I can do. And it allows me to have a little bit of diversity in my writing, which is good. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself unless you're going for a real specialty niche market, in which case that's actually a good thing. It all depends on the experience you're trying to deliver. Question number 3. If your readers had 1 sentence to describe you, the author, and not your books, what would that sentence be? In this day and age, developing your author brand is almost as essential, if not more essential, than developing your writing brand as well. Whether it be a series or individual books that have sort of a collective feeling, that's developing your writing brand, but you as an author. Because with social media, blogging, videos, podcasts, etc., every author is starting to become more of a public figure, much more so than they were in the past. As a result, you need to make sure you understand what you're doing as an author. And this ties right in to question number 4. What are the essentials of your brand? And this is looking at your writing brand, your author brand. What are the key elements that need to be consistent throughout every piece of work that you do that will help people identify who you are as a writer as well as what you're creating? And if you step away from these essentials, it would completely dishearten your readership. It would basically skew your market so far to the right that you'd end up losing readers. And this may be the way you write, this may be your sense for dialogue, and it may also just be the genre that you write in. If you go into a very specific niche and develop a very strong base of followers, if you suddenly step out of that genre, it's very difficult to do. If you want a perfect example, look at J.K. Rowling. I applaud her efforts for trying to get Casual Vacancy sold, but still, if you run into anybody in the street and say, do you know what J.K. Rowling writes? They're gonna still say Harry Potter. That's her brand. She's trying to shift away from it, but at this point, she is known for Harry Potter. There's really not much she can do because she did such a phenomenal job with Harry Potter that she can't shake it at this point. Granted, she's still going to sell more books than most of us ever will in our entire lifetime, just in one book alone, but it's still the brand. That's what it boils down to. What are the essentials that you need to implement, and what's going to keep people coming back time and time again? That's establishing your brand. Lazy Tom, have you answered the questions? Yeah. Number 1, it's awesome. Number 2, holy shit. Number 3, he's a god among insects. And number 4, f you, I'm awesome. Well, that seemed rational. So I talked about the elements of your brand. Let's go into that a little bit more. To me, there are 5 key elements to any good brand that you have to establish. Now, this applies to business, but it also applies to writers. It can also go to any creative entity, whether you're a filmmaker, artist, doesn't matter. First up is a clear mission statement. Now, the mission statement doesn't necessarily have to say, I'm going to write science fiction fantasy, or I'm going to write steampunk. It doesn't matter. In fact, a lot of mission statements actually are not overly specific. They're a rather broad idea. The mission statement should explain what you, the author, want to put out in this world. Positioning. Now, get your minds out of the gutter. I'm not talking about that kind of positioning. What I am talking about is where you're going to actually be placing the writing. Is it going to be exclusively ebooks? Are you trying to make sure that you're an innovator in the digital field as it's shifting and evolving and moving forward? Or are you more of a traditionalist where you're going to be actually writing your initial manuscript on a typewriter? Are you going to blog? Are you going to be using social media? And within that, you can also look at whether you're going to just focus on 1 or 2 social networks and really trying to bring it home, or are you going to try to create a very wide, sweeping series of events that are going to create a big net that hopefully everybody will catch and fall into. And then it also boils down to demand. Is your work in demand? Because let's face it, in this world, in this day and age, there are so many query letters and so many submissions going on. It's a pretty saturated market for writers, especially those trying to break in. And as a result, you need to make sure that you're actually creating demand for your product. And this is where you need to create really unique elements to your brand and unique elements in your writing. Things that are going to separate you from the rest of the pack and actually get you out of that slush pile and up to the top of the queue. And in order to determine this demand, you have to look at what's selling, what hasn't sold yet, and if there's an actual place for that book. Obviously, if there's a book that you've always wanted to read, but you haven't actually seen it on shelves, write it. Because if you're reading a bunch and you're actually in the market, buying books, reading all the time, which you should if you're not already, then guess what? Odds are there's other people who are asking for the same book. 4th element is community. How are you going to develop a community that you can interact with? Is it going to be social media, or is it going to be actual appearances at conventions? Is it going to be speaking events? How are you going to actually develop your base of followers and readers? It's a very delicate balance, and the thing is, there are so many opportunities now. And then there's the experience. We already touched a little bit on this, but let's go into a little bit more detail. Experience is how they're going to experience your writing. Are you wanting to create a completely new format of e-reading that's going to have more interaction and new elements that haven't been put in place yet, that involves audio or perhaps websites or research? Is there going to be annotated footnotes that you can actually click on because your world is so expansive, and if people want to dive into it that fully, they can see the languages you developed, the characters you've built, some of the backstories that maybe don't find their way into the manuscript itself. It all depends. It's the experience that you want, whether it's that traditional feeling of just being outside in a hammock with a little bit of a summer drink and enjoying a nice read, or is it going to be something really innovative, really high-tech and savvy that's going to appeal to the early adopters? Lazy Tom, you've created your mission statement, right? Yeah, my mission, should I choose to accept it, and I have, is to finish these donuts. The final major element of differentiating your brand. And this is looking at how you're going to separate yourself from the pack once more. How are you going to actually be able to reach agents? Are you going to focus your efforts on one agent specifically at a time? Or are you going to just make sure that you create a really great manuscript, send it out to any agent you think that might be remotely interested and hope that one catches? Now you have to be careful with agents and editors and publishers, because sometimes if you do something really weird, quirky, or unique, it could actually be a turnoff for them. It could actually push them away from you, because the key is that you need to make sure that you're researching your agents and editors, finding out their submission guidelines, and within that you can find out where you need to be completely firm and strict, whether it be probably your formatting of your actual manuscript and your query, and then where you can maybe have some interpretation if you're seeing some agents that are representing some more quirky authors or trying things themselves at the agency that are not traditional in the publishing field. When you really differentiate your brand, that means that you are creating an experience so specific and so involved for the reader that they have to have that experience. Nothing else will work. Because the thing is, if you find good success, there will be substitutes and there's going to be rip-offs and knockoffs that are going to try to capitalize on it. But if you've done your job as a writer, that means your books are what the readers need, and they won't accept anything else, and they cannot wait for the next book to come out. Let's look at it from an actual business standpoint, through food and drink. You can't just go and get Aunt Smithy's chocolate wafer sandwiches. No, you need Oreos. You need that filling, even though you know it's fatty and sugary and bad for you. You don't care. And also beer. You won't accept Blarney McShamus's Irish Stout. No, you need Guinness. You need that hearty, strong stout that you seek out in the liquor store day in and day out. Excuse me. This is what creates a great brand. It's when you need Oreos and Guinness. Guinness and Oreos, nothing else will substitute. So, appreciate you coming by. We've got a lot of exercises and questions to go over. If you have any questions, tweet me at Thomas A. Fowler. Use the hashtag WritersConquest. And you can always find the big central hub at thomasafowler.com. As always, kick some ass, be proud of what you do.